Before I begin this review, I want to make sure you guys know that this key was obtained from the developer. The developer reached out to us, gave us a key in exchange for coverage of their game. That won't affect the overall score of the review, but I want to make sure you guys know before I begin. You're a minuscule particle in the ecosystem that is the world and its beings. In the big picture, you're only one pixel on the television screen that is life. Now that I've possibly horribly depressed you and made you wonder about your own existence, let's consider the alternative view. You know, how a dead pixel stands out on screen if it's not doing its job. One pixel is as important as the next, and sometimes a single pixel is the most important thing in the world because its contribution finishes the puzzle that is life. Now that you think I'm reading way too much into things, let's start the review, shall we? The Adventures of Pip is made by TikTok Games and sells for $15 on Steam. It's a pixel platformer that, hold on, I know, please don't leave. I know that pixel platformers have flooded the Steam market over the last year, but the Adventures of Pip does have a unique mechanic that makes it stand out from most of the rest in terms of gameplay, and its level design is above average in the genre. Even with its faults, it has something to offer, which I'm going to go into today. The game starts out with the princess being kidnapped. Of course the princess is being kidnapped. Okay, but it's a little bit different. She has a magical power here with this bit stream, and basically she's being kidnapped for the fact that she can make the evil queen more powerful. Okay, it's like the fairy tales of old. You set out as a single pixel on a quest to bring the princess back unharmed, while attempting to defeat the evil queen. The theme of the bit stream and the ideas of different evolutions presenting the kind of person you are become a common theme in the Adventures of Pip, which I will get into depth in a little bit. Now, the game is a basic platformer of the bit persuasion, but the standout feature here of the Adventures of Pip is his three forms. First of all, Pip starts as a single pixel. Yep, you heard me, that's a single pixel, despite other models obviously using more pixels than him and being of equivalent size. Look, the princess says it is, alright? Just take it. Anyway, in the world, you will run across these types of specific enemies. These enemies give you the ability to morph into your next form. Now, you will only start the game with the ability to use one form, but as you complete worlds, you will unlock two other forms as well. You go from the single pixel red blob to an 8-bit childlike form to the 16-bit young adult form. Each of these forms have specific advantages over the others, which you'll have to recognize in order to get through the game, which I considered to be its main mechanic in the end. For example, the single pixel one has a higher jump than the rest, and he can float, but he doesn't have any way of attacking enemies other than jumping on their heads. Now, he can fit into tight spaces where others can't. Meanwhile, the middle form is the fastest of the three, and he can jump and hang on walls and jump off of walls. He's probably the most useful form out of the three, because while he only has a basic punch, it's his extra mobility within the platforming of the levels that is critical. Now, you have your big guy form, which has a sword that can break through blocks, and he's the heaviest of the three, which means that he isn't affected by wind devices or even bounce pads for that matter. Now, you can devolve at any time by hitting the left trigger if you're playing with a controller, of course, and it does an area of attack blast that will move you down one form, so you can switch between the evolution of forms. You pause in the air while doing that with a slow-mo type effect, like those old school animes that had people transforming, like Sailor Moon for example. Now, you can cancel the transformation and its related attack by releasing the button partway through the transformation sequence, meaning if you're about to make a mistake and change into the form that you really don't want, it's possible to correct. Now, what makes the evolution and de-evolution mechanic work in terms of gameplay? Well, it's the fact that you need to develop a skill for yourself, scanning the layout of the environment to understand which form is best suited for it. Enemy position placement near key elements such as breakable blocks and positioning near a ledge that you need to get to is how you know what form you will need to start with, or change into while running along the gauntlet of levels. If you're finding a section particularly hard, you may not be looking at it the right way, as you might not have gotten the right ability set to deal with the specific set of hazards in question. You may need more mobility, you may need a little bit more weight. It is a difference between each level, and you'll run across the fact that you'll need all three forms in some form. Now, in terms of the gameplay, that really works, especially for the first 3 of the total 5 worlds. Part of that has to do with the level design and variety that it throws at you. New configurations of monsters and hazards help bring new challenges as you go along, and it'll keep you on your toes. Now, you're not here for the combat. Despite the fact that you can fight enemies and will have to jump on several of them Mario style, when it comes down to it, it's just a way to get more height in most cases. You're here for platforming and puzzle-like platforming. The controls with either the keyboard or the controller works well to complement this gameplay. You have enough precision to get through the various hazards that the game throws at you, but not too precise where it's too forgivable. Now, note how I said the first 3 worlds there. Now look, the other 2 worlds in question do provide a challenge and all, but unlike the progression of the first 3 worlds, I found them to be a little bit inconsistent in terms of their challenge. One level would give me a reasonable challenge, the next wouldn't. It leads to an inconsistent experience at times, and I found the game more enjoyable in short bursts more than anything else when it got to that point. I found that when it came to the learning aspect of the game did much better than after all of its tricks had been taught to you. In each level, there are 3 hidden villagers that you can grab. One of the common things that you'll need to realize off the bat is that spaces in the wall of the environment or seemingly out of place areas that don't look right probably means that there's a secret or 2 hanging there. This adds some length to the game, and it's not too crazy in terms of the hidden nature of the collectibles in that quest, but it does help. Now, you do get currency you can spend in the town to upgrade your character. I'd suggest getting more health to make the game easier if you're going to play the game, but some of the other upgrades are rather useful, like getting twice more currency from enemies that you defeat, or the ability to destroy blocks in your second form. But you can always buy temporary items to find villagers in a level, which is useful for the collectors out there. Now, what the strongest element of Adventures of Pip is its level design. The fact of the matter is, the game teaches you basic mechanics, but the way that they put those mechanics together over a period of time really helps in terms of the level design. You'll have to figure out exactly what little change was made in order to enemy position and walls and things like that in order to understand what to do next. The puzzle element comes from that. How do you get your character from point A to point B? Not like your typical puzzles where you have to hit a switch, or for example. This one's all about using the environment around you, and it works very well. If you want a game that's challenging your brain in terms of when to do one thing and when to do another, The Adventures of Pip does that very well. And even with the strong level design, even when I mentioned before those 2 last worlds, those levels in themselves were good. Now, I would have changed the format of some of them, maybe, changed the order of them a little bit, but in the end, it was great, and I really enjoyed each level as a whole, with minor exceptions here and there. Now, the boss fights follow the old conventions of video game bosses from the NES era. They are going to do a pattern of some sort that you'll have to deal with, jumping over them and taking advantage of your environment. Now, I wish I could say that the boss fights were the high point of the game, but most of the time, they are way too simple. There's not a lot of challenge in most of the cases in this case, even with the different types of bosses. And while early in the game it's a little bit more difficult, once you get some extra hearts, you won't have any problems. And that's the thing, mostly have no problems. I say that with one specific example in mind. Let me take a moment here to talk to the developers. I enjoyed your game, I really did. There's a lot of good elements in it, good design decisions, in particular, your level designs in several of the levels. I liked the simplicity of the game, but the different elements that you added to make more puzzle elements to it. But to whoever designed this boss, I hope you know that you literally had me cussing at the top of my lungs, and you should feel bad. Like really, really bad. Now look, the game was challenging at times, and I did die a little bit, but there was a level of a forgiving nature up to this point. This boss took that, threw it out the window, and then it posted an opinion online and got the wrath of the entire internet and focused it into the design of this fight. Yes, I'm a little bit bitter about this. People may think I'm exaggerating on this fight, but note the following mechanic. Now, once this guy attacks you, he drops a block. Don't get hit by it, by the way, or you're dead. In order to get rid of the block, which you have to get rid of at least once in this fight in order to succeed, you have to be in your third form. But you'll notice the column there. As you sit on the column, it will actually push itself down with more weight, and so with the block on there, it falls at a reasonable rate. If you try to push it into the lava, which you need to at least, if you don't do it right on the first attempt, and I mean right as in you do it correctly all the way through, if you take a little bit of a second to push it, you're going to lose. Now, here's the thing, you'll be in the lava at that point, and you'll have to restart the fight again. Now, you can devolve during this, and move to the wall on the side to let it recover during that time. But don't accidentally hit the enemy while doing that, or you'll be in the lava. Oh, and just for kicks, if you get the block in the lava, you'll have to do it again. Oh, and you'll likely die right about here. This is the point where I wanted to grip the controller in anger and say things that would make my mother wonder if she didn't raise me right. I probably died on this specific level as much as the entire rest of the game. And the reason there? It's a little bit too focused. The fact of the matter is you needed precise timing on this boss fight. You needed absolutely precise timing, unlike the rest of the game where there was a little bit of leeway. This one, you didn't do it right, it was done, it was over. Okay, I'm ranting on this a little bit. I'm gonna go back to the rest of the review, but please, for the love of God, figure out how to change this boss fight up a little bit. Maybe make the pillar a little bit slower to descend. Because honestly, I really hate that thing. I really hate this guy. As to the rest of the story, there's a weird theme that develops regarding, I don't know what to call it, classism? Basically, single pixel entities are looked down in this world. And while it never comes off as like a racism kind of situation, it does provide a theme in the background for the game of the idea of don't let who people think you are, let them define who you are kind of thing. Except that you can shift into other forms, so I'm not sure how that's supposed to work in terms of the message exactly. I mean, in essence, it works due to the fact that you have to play each of the forms and learn their strengths and have them work in harmony together. I'm reading way too much into it. There's a simple message here that tries to come off. It is inconsistent, but honestly, it does work. As to the music, let's listen to a compilation of some of the music that the game has to offer right now. Jake Kaufman is behind the music in this game, and if you don't know that name by now, let me just mention a few games. Shovel Knight, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, and Double Dragon Neon. Needless to say, the music works well for the game and is definitely worth listening through your experience on it. No need to put something else on here, the music works. In the end, the game does a lot of things competently, and it was an enjoyable game to play throughout the experience. It took me about 4 hours to beat, and it was about 340 based on the in-game time, with 84 out of the 108 villagers rescued. The length may be an issue for people with the $15 price tag, and while it does have the evolution portion that makes it a bit different from other pixel platformers, it's not too different from other games out there. It's got a good soundtrack and a reasonable aesthetic to help it along for sure, but some inconsistencies in gameplay at times and a possible length issue brings the game to a 7 out of 10. It's definitely worth your time if you like charming platformers, and there's some strengths here as I pointed out. It's not on the level of Shovel Knight, that's for sure, but not many games are, and it does the job in delivering the experience in the end. Hey everybody, this is Sean Joy, aka Dragnix, and I want to thank you for watching. If you like this kind of content and want to see more on the channel, you can hit that subscribe button on the left hand side there. Also, if you want to see more of my content that I make on a daily basis, go hit that bottom left hand side to look at my channel. And of course, I'll link to the last video on the TechRaptor channel that we produced. Once again, I thank everybody for watching. Leave comments and feedback on the video below, and I will see you all later.